and welcome to Built on Air, a podcast and video series about all things Airtable. I'm your host, Zoe Vanderplu, and I'd like to thank our sponsor, OpenSide. Visit openside.com for products and services that will take your Airtable to the next level. Use promo code BuiltOnAir, one word, all caps, for a one-time $20 credit off of any purchase. Today I'm chatting with Sam Koster, co-founder of Butterscotch Shenanigans, an independent video game studio based in St. Louis, Missouri. Butterscotch is probably best known for their 2016 release Crashlands, and they're releasing their newest game, Levelhead, in April 2019. Levelhead is a level-building platformer where players become designers and can share what they've built with the world. Butterscotch's origin story is unique. It was created by three brothers, Sam, Seth, and Adam, who all had a wealth of unrelated formal education, psychology, financial planning, and a PhD in molecular biology, respectively, but minimal industry experience. Sam talks about their evolution as a studio, how they're learning to run a better business, and how their creative process flows. They originally started using Airtable to keep track of their PR contacts, but it has become so ubiquitous in the office now, it's almost a running joke. Sam demos an Airtable base for us that he built to develop the structure and flow of their newest game, Levelhead, down to the music tracks chosen for each level. And as a quick bonus, since I love Airtable bases that solve boring personal problems, Sam shows us a base punnily called The Warehouse, where he used his phone to easily catalog all the random items in his basement so he'd never have to double buy superglue ever again. Check out the show notes for more things Levelhead, available April 2019 on Steam, and head over to BuiltOnAir.com for more things Airtable. Hey Sam, how's it going?
Good.
Welcome to Built on Air. We're so happy to have you on the show today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Sam. I am a co-founder of Butterscotch Shenanigans, and we're a game studio. And we're actually located out in the Midwest in St. Louis. And a lot of what I do for the studio is a combination of art, design, and marketing. So I wear a lot of hats. We're a really small team. So everybody on the team kind of has a bunch of different roles. And most of my day-to-day either involves, making pictures, making monsters and stuff like that for the games, or designing levels and designing content for the games themselves. So I have a high need for a lot of organizational structure on top of all three of those activities.
Right. Yeah, I imagine the task switching can get pretty overwhelming when you're, having to have all of those different buckets in your head, basically at all times. So tell us a little bit about how Butterscotch started. Did you and your co-founder, know each other previously, or who hatched this crazy plan?
Yeah, you could say that. So it's actually a studio led by three brothers. So
nice.
we've known each other for some time. And the best part about it was none of us actually planned to get into games. We were actually, I think when we were kids, our parents really severely reduced our screen time. We had probably 30 minutes a day that we were allowed to use. And we had an egg timer. So you'd set an egg timer and then you start playing StarCraft or something like that. And a lot of blood was spilled because someone would come up and tweak it, downward a little bit. It was just it was a horrible backfiring situation, I think, for our parents, because now this is what we do for a living. But all three of the co-founding brothers, we got into this all very sideways. So I have a degree in psychology. One of the brothers, Adam, who does all of our web and tech tooling and stuff like that, he is actually a PhD in molecular biology. Oh. And the other brother was in the middle of an MBA and law school thing and then dropped out to come make video games. So, and he's like a certified financial analyst as well. So we have this really weird orientation toward games where it's just a very interesting thing for us to do, but not something that all of us plan to do. And so as a result, we're very keen on using on focusing on our process, I think, because there's a little lack of confidence maybe on some of the fact that we don't have any training regarding any of the things that we actually do for sort of the core of the business.
Right. So you're like, here's my street cred. Look at this really nice business plan we've drawn up.
Exactly.
Even though we're all previously academics.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I love that. That's such an interesting perspective too, I think, because it, you always hear about how, whenever some kids like, I want to be a video game designer, everyone's like, good luck. That's a funny joke.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really cool that you guys have, kind of grounded things in reality and made things work.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean,
so
it's it
go ahead.
started like I mean, it started kind of similar to that though, which is like so my brother Seth and I did what's called a game jam, which is a 48-hour game making event about 8 years ago, and we did it together. And so I just happened to do the art for it. He happened to do programming for it, and we built this just hideous but hilarious game in just 2 days. Right. We demoed it to a crowd, and it was the first time we worked together, and demoed it to a crowd here in St. Louis, and everyone was just sort of laughing their butts off and had like such a good time watching it. And we just had this moment where we were like, oh, maybe this is what we should be doing. um no idea, again, like completely ignorant of how intense and how absurdly difficult this industry is, but
Right.
I think that combination of ignorance and arrogance is super handy for getting started in all these things.
Right. Yeah, you need to strike the right balance of
Yeah.
the two. Okay, so that was 8 years ago. You guys made this silly, game for Game Jam, and people loved it. You guys loved it. So then how did you get the third brother on board? How did Butterscotch become what it is now?
Yeah, so we actually, my brother Seth and I, then the one who did the game jam together. We ended up after that jam, we got hired in the parking lot by like one of the other game studios in town.
Nice.
They were like, we want these two randos come in. So they sort of gave us our first shot, and we worked there for about 6 or 7 months, and then sort of had, I think, gotten to the point where, again, we were building up our skills enough and thought we knew what we were doing enough that we were like, we're going to go break out, we can do this on our own. And so for the next week, so we quit, and we just had some money in the bank and completely bootstrapped the thing. And then we published 2 games in 6 months. The first one failed super hard, and the second one did well enough that I could sort of stay mildly alive on it. And Seth's wife started supporting him at that point directly. And we sort of doubled down and said, okay, let's make something bigger. Taking 3 months to make something, it's always going to be a small project, not going to make a big splash. So let's do something bigger. And that big game became Crashlands. And about halfway through development on that one, our third, the oldest brother, actually, Adam, who's doing the PhD at the time, he did his dissertation defense. We flew down to Texas and gave him his business cards as his graduation gift, and sort of stole him away from academia. And then that was sort of the forming of all three of us finally together. And Crashlands launched in 2016 and did very, very well. And so we won a few like Game of the Year awards and stuff like that on mobile with the game. And just like that sort of flagship product ended up becoming the foundation for how the studio operates. And since then, we've been building other games and mainly sort of trying to figure out how to run a business in a legitimate capacity, I think.
Right. Yeah. Which is, I can imagine it's hard enough when you're also not brothers who,
Yes.
for the ones who would mess with each other's egg timers years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, oh my gosh, I love that story. That's so great. Yeah. Anyway, I'm an only child, so just like the idea of having a sibling to collaborate with just seems awesome, let alone two of them.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen of other siblings, also having siblings where you can actually form a team and work together instead of just annoying each other, is a really special thing to have, I think.
Yeah, I think when it works, it's absolutely wonderful, and when it doesn't work, it's it's family stuff. So
Right. You're like, we have to get over this. We have no choice.
Exactly.
So tell us, you do have a new release coming out soon. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I would love to. Yeah, so our newest game is called Levelhead, and it's a platformer maker. So essentially what that means is it's a platformer where you can actually build levels and then share them with your friends and also share them just worldwide. We've made the whole game about this delivery robot named GR18, who you are essentially training up by building these courses and taking them through some of these obstacle courses. And you have to deliver packages sort of across the galaxy is essentially what the training is. And so the whole thing's sort of grounded in this comical corporate atmosphere, almost like an Office Space sort of situation.
Mhm.
Lots of bureaucracy, lots of bosses and stuff like that. And yeah, players are the really exciting thing for us about it is, we, like I said, we kind of stumbled into making games, and we find that building a game like this where players actually become the designers is such a fun thing for us to sort of turn around and be able to do, because a lot of people, once they dip their toes in, they just get really excited about it because it's so fun to make stuff and then see other people experience it and play it and just watch the reactions that they have. And so we're really hoping to build a really robust community in that. And it'll be available on Steam sometime in April, I guess. We're doing sort of a secret launch of the thing. So it'll be coming out very soon.
Cool. So we will keep an eye out on Steam for that secret launch date. And also, of course, to tie Airtable into
Uh-huh.
everything, we were talking about how using Airtable was actually sort of a key component in building and kind of mapping out this game. So I guess tell us a little bit about how you found Airtable and how you started using it, and then also in a little bit you'll show us a demo of your Levelhead base.
Yeah. So we found Airtable, I think about a year and a half ago or so. And it was when we were just every so often we'll do sort of like a tool sweep where we'll take a step back and just sort of essentially try to get a better pulse on what the up and coming products seem to be and which ones seem to be being used by a bunch of our dev friends and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I think we actually found it just sort of through one of these lists of, oh, here's all the stuff that I use, so that someone else had posted. And we hop into it, and immediately it was obvious. We were like, oh, this is a spreadsheet that's actually a database that has all this stuff in it. And Adam, our web guy, was like, I don't even know how they built this. And so then we started, got very excited about it, and we dive in. And the first thing we used it for actually was like sort of a contact management system, which
Hmm.
sort of most people's probably easy entry. If you're in business, you need a way to somehow organize all these contacts without having to do a lot of the stuff that spreadsheets make you do. And we have a thing called Dossie, which I do have a Dossie universe sort of template thing available for people. And that one was very helpful because essentially it allowed us to put our 5 years at the time, 5 or 6 years of business contacts into one place. And then we had a few of these other metrics that were tying back and forth between different parts of the database where we could track articles that were written by certain journalists. So we knew who, with the future launch to reach out to because they'd already covered us, that sort of thing. We were running our own PR at the time. So since then, we've used it for all sorts of stuff inside the studio. And the major point for Airtable for us is when it comes to design, especially when it comes to the actual content design. So what I mean by that is in Levelhead, for example, yes, we have to choose how the player moves through the world, how they jump, how all these different enemies work. That's sort of like high level design. When it comes to the level design of the game, you have to figure out how to arrange basically a learning order of all the different concepts that the game has, how to deploy those in a way that the pacing feels really good and provides a variety of experience for players. And then also, really figure out a way to effectively, thoughtfully choose between certain aspects of the game being included or not. So, for example, Levelhead has a bunch of different music tracks, and I could just sort of willy nilly assign them to stuff, but it's highly likely that I'll accidentally, put too many in one spot that are the same, or what's something like that. And so, having some, essentially a mental map, in this case, built in Airtable, helped to get my sort of feet under me, and then also make it so that when I came back, given that I wear so many hats, I might be doing something. I might be building a trailer for a couple of days, or doing some podcasts or something like that, and then come back and then be like, okay, I need to hop back into this rapidly, and building that mental model back up of where's the campaign at, which level am I on, like how was I going to think about this. You need some robust way to organize information. So
Right.
yeah, I used Airtable mainly for the campaign structure in Levelhead.
Right. Especially since you can use the filtering, right, to do that brain dump and be like, oh, hey, here are all of the songs that I think might be good. And then it's not like a spreadsheet where you're like, oh, I have to delete these ones that I'm not going to use. You can always sort of go back and pull from your little bank of possibilities, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
So go ahead and share your screen. I think
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
a great time now to actually see what that looks like. And then I think you'll maybe talk a little bit about the base and then also kind of show us how that translates into the game in reality.
Yeah. So this is what you can see here. I guess you can see my screen. Okay.
I can indeed.
Okay. So again, it's a simple idea, but mainly it's again because of what you said about the being able to bucket certain content and then just pull that repeatedly up. You can see what's happening here. So these are all the levels on just sort of going down the list here, and they're laid out in basically what is the linear order. There is some branching in the campaign, but it's not as important as the linear sort of progression. So there's 65 levels in here currently, And essentially, what I needed to do was each of these levels is actually introducing a new piece of content, right?
Cool.
And so I have to make sure that I know. So this column is what am I teaching in this level, right? What am I reinforcing for the player? And basically, plotting the levels out like this allowed me to both get the structure for even just knowing how to design it. Like designing without constraints is absolutely brutal.
It's
And
terrible. Yeah, you need the box so you can decide if you want to move out of it or not.
exactly. And so the first thing I did was I made these first 8 levels, and I said, okay, what's like the first thing the player needs to learn how to do? They need to know how to grab stuff, get the package, and then get to the end and like exactly what those mechanics look like. Okay, so you just kind of keep on building from that. So this was I was able to essentially just write out, almost like pseudocode, and then I could pop back in and then actually build the levels based on this stuff.
Mhm.
And when it comes to the rest of the base here, you can see that I also checked for pacing. So over here we have type. So essentially, if the level lends itself more toward like puzzling behaviors or platforming or like more of a rush or combat, then I can essentially try to tie some of these high level themes to each level to make sure that as you go through 65 levels that there's a good mix of this different type of content. You'll see there's certain levels that were inserted in here. These ones that are empty are ones that I put in after putting all this thematic information and realizing, oh, I have a gap here where I have 3 rush levels in a row. I need something that's more chilled out, for example.
Right.
And then when you come over here, here's the music thing I was talking about. So we have a bunch of these really fun music tracks that our team called Fat Bar did for us. And the problem, like these are the names of all the different tracks, but again, like you want to introduce players to music in a way that makes sense and has some rhyme to it, some rhyme or reason to it. And so this way I didn't necessarily double up on too many songs too much because players die a lot in this game. It's a very challenging platformer. So you don't want them to hear just one song for 40 minutes straight because you accidentally put it in 4 levels back to back to back.
Right.
So there's that. And then the trickier part comes down to the unlocks. So the way Levelhead works, like I mentioned, that players get to edit and build their own levels, right? So the issue is that we have to unlock that content for them slowly, right? So you don't just get to hop into the editor with every single one of the like 100 something tools available to you.
Right.
So playing through the campaign actually unlocks that content. So essentially what I did here was I paired this with the badges over here, and these badges are essentially those content unlocks. And then each of these is an item from the game, right? So we have GR18, the goal, backdrop, environment elements, that sort of thing. And then I could actually plan and track these things, and then also tie, which levels are attached to them from this side over here.
Cool.
To see how many levels lead up to certain pieces. Now, the interesting thing, so I built this whole thing in Airtable, applied it in game, and then we played through it, and it was fantastic for sort of getting that like mental structure figured out. And then now that I've sort of done this large amount of this sort of foundational work, we built additional tooling inside of the game actually to make it easier to essentially have this concept, which was built out almost in a prototype way in Airtable,
Mhm.
baked into the game. So there's design tools that I can use in the game to easily do this sort of thing. So I can show
Very
you
nice.
actually translates then into the game. So can you see this?
Let's see. I am still seeing the Airtable base.
Okay, one second. I'll switch to this one. So can you see this okay?
Let's see. It's black. I think it might take a second. Yeah. And yeah, if it's just yes, I
Got it?
see it.
Okay. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So this is the like the main sort of menu of the game actually. So it's designed to feel like a little space station point and click adventure sort of thing. So if we go into the campaign, I take the spaceship out to space here, and this is actually how all of this ends up rendering out, right? So you're the player in this little ship, and you can travel between the different level orbs, which are the different levels that you actually saw in that Airtable base. And if I inspect here, you can see how big this is. These are where those unlocks are coming from.
Cool.
You can see this is essentially how that planned content ends up being broken out in the scope of this. And you can see why I need this, because this gets gigantic. There's
Right. It's quite large.
so much information here. And again, like, yeah, you can kind of slap it together, but the reality is that even just a cursory amount of planning can make it so that the experience for the player at the end of the day is way, way better, right? It can be more
Right.
exciting, and you can have better ideas of how to pace content and stuff like that. So yeah, that's essentially how all this has translated into the game itself.
I love it. Very cool. Oh my gosh, I just want to like stare at the nebula for like 5 minutes. Um,
Good. I'm glad. That's good.
so then, are you really kind of the only person in your team that works in Airtable, or will your brothers also kind of look? Is this like your realm, or how do you guys kind of collaborate if you
Oh
do?
yeah. So all of us do Airtable stuff. So again, because it's just such a broadly applicable tool, it's the sort of thing that makes it very easy to put everything from. We used to use it actually for asset management.
Hmm.
For example, I would be making art, and then my brother Seth would have to implement it in the game. Right, it has to get in there somehow. When we were tracking in the early stages, we used to track actually through Airtable which assets were sort of pending, which ones were ready to go, and we've used it for a bunch of different purposes. And oftentimes, what it allows us to do is, in a really interesting way, kind of build up the mental structures needed to figure out how to do something really effectively. Whether that remains in Airtable or in the case of the art implementation, we're like, oh, we should actually be using something like Trello to track all of our work. So,
Right. Yeah. You're like, this is a little bit too much.
exactly.
Um,
But it's a nice sort of it's such a good tool because it allows for that sort of mental flexibility and exploring a space in a really productive way. And we've used it for just all sorts of stuff in house.
Right. Yeah. And I like your point earlier about how it kind of, if you spend just a little bit of time to organize it, it's really easy to come back to like thinking I have a ton of bases for like projects I got really excited about for like one night,
Uh
and
huh.
then I'm like, okay, that's enough. But it is when you're ready to kind of come back to that, everything's just kind of laid out nicely for you. And you can kind of set up your future self to kind of dig back into it really easily. Um, so I guess tell us a little bit more then about. I'm just curious about kind of the whole. You showed us that Airtable with the levels, but in terms of you guys are kind of talking about how you have this kind of general model that you're using to build games. Tell
Hmm.
us just a little bit more about like how that process works for the three of you, especially having three co-founders. I imagine there can be like a lot of voices in the room
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. Yeah, and we've grown up to 5 people total now too.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, Seth and I are actually the primary sort of leads on all the new game related content.
Mhm.
And what that generally looks like is, uh, so it was actually funny when Adam joined the studio, the oldest brother joined the studio. We were worried because Seth and I somehow always come at everything from opposite ends, and so we were like, "Oh my god, this is going to be bad because now there's going to be 2 people on one side, right?" No, Adam just has his own opinion that's somehow, contrary to everything we're doing too, and so we find that there's a lot of richness in having that dialogue, right? So it's very rare actually that someone will have an idea and then that it'll just go sort of straight in.
Mhm.
More so, someone will have an idea and then it'll get sort of refined through a lively discussion over like just 15 minutes or so, and then it'll go in. And so, a lot of the way that the game gets built is on a highly iterative sort of cycle. So we don't. A lot of game studios do large amounts of pre-production and planning and that sort of thing. And I
Mhm.
think it's more and more important as your team gets bigger, of course, because you got to kind of line up, the whole navy to get everybody in the same direction.
Right.
But in our case, being so small, it's much easier to simply find the core of an idea. So in the case of Levelhead, it was, oh, we want people to be able to build their own levels. That was basically it. And then just start building from there and then iterating. And we try to do a lot of what we call listening to the game. So you just build a lot for a few days or so and then sit down and play it. And the game will sort of tell you what it wants you to do, essentially, what the next piece is. And
Right.
so the richness then comes from arguing with one another, and then taking those steps back every so often to say, okay, the game can only talk in the language that it currently has. So what other entirely new things do we need to sort of put in here that could add another whole sort of.
Right. Yeah, I like that sort of concept of like listening to the game. Like it, in some ways, when you create something, it does kind of tell you what it wants. And then also, what a great kind of combination where you have the game, right, as sort of a voice, and then all of you guys as well, which tend to have differing opinions. So really excited to check out Levelhead once it launches.
Yeah.
Um, And then we do have just, more fun Airtable things.
Oh yeah.
We do have a sort of, I guess, sillier use case for
Mhm.
Airtable, more about not, butterscotch oriented
It's
things,
a
but
personal thing entirely.
yes, human organization. So tell us a little bit about your warehouse
Well,
space.
yeah. So the story is the problem I had was I went to I think Home Depot and I bought some super glue. And then I came downstairs to go into my basement to go glue this thing that had broken. And I look over on the shelf and there's some super glue that I just hadn't noticed when I had checked, right? And I thought there has got to be a better way. And then, of course, we had just started using Airtable a ton in the studio. And the joke around the studio is we always whisper the name Airtable when that's sort of a tool you should use. So someone just goes Airtable, and you're like, oh, okay, right, that's the thing for me. And so, yeah, I was just sort of complaining about this, and I thought, in my head, Airtable, and went along my basement and marked out. Basically, I had like a sort of a shelving unit down there, and so I marked it out almost like you would in a warehouse. So there's 3 different rows, and then there's A through I think F or something like that. We'll see it in the warehouse. And then essentially what I did was I cataloged everything that was in each one of those cubic feet of positions, took pictures of it, and made a little intro thing so you can actually do it on your phone too. And that's how I take
Nice.
care of it. So I'll share that right now. You can see what this looks like. So this is again simple idea, but because of how easy it is to use Airtable, it's really easy. So locations, so these are those sort of locked or those locked down possible locations. So the X's are these 2 big bins I have, the Y's are these other big bins, and then you can see just all this stuff. And I was tired of not knowing what stuff I had in my own
Right.
house. Right? And they're all useful things, but they're things that you use like once or twice a year sometimes, right? Where it's like, oh, I
Right.
don't need to, I'm not constantly hanging things up, and so you can forget about those different pieces. And so I just went through and did all this, and then even applied it to the upstairs because I have a bunch of electronics equipment and stuff like that. And so Pokemon. I need to know where my Pokemon game is.
Yes.
I never need to
If
find
you
it.
need it, you really need it.
Super important. And so, and each one has a picture on it too. So if I don't know what the heck it is, then I can just sort of load it up. Oh, there's this Nintendo DS I have. Excellent. And check out everything from there. So this is the sort of thing where it just made it a lot easier to, know if I had stuff in my house. And then before I go usually to the hardware store, I can do sort of a sanity check and just search my base. Just say,
Right.
I already
Yeah.
have this thing. But
No,
I
I've
probably
done that before where I'm like, I know we have, like these hooks or this glue or
uh-huh.
like sandpaper. It's somewhere. And then I'll just I'm like, I have no idea where it is. I'll just buy more. And then like of course, just because this is how things work,
Uh-huh.
like the next day I'll be getting something else for the project and then I'll find the thing I just
Yep.
bought. It's like, Zoe, like get it together. So how do you use, are you just accessing the Airtable app on your phone then to kind of tour your warehouse?
Yeah, so I built just that I made that form view thing.
Hmm.
Essentially it's just for adding it in. But yeah, you can look at the table then through your phone, but mainly it's for recording, and I did all my cell phone, right? So had the app there and then made that little form, and then enlisted the help of my wife, and I was like, we have to go document the warehouse. And she was
Yeah.
like, why do you like this? And I was like, amazing. And so yeah, we just kind of went down there and took care of everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely need to do something like that for myself. Yeah, no, I love learning about people's personal projects for Airtable
Mhm.
because almost every single one I'm like, I should be using it for this. I
Yeah.
should be using it for that. And I do use it for some personal things, but it's just there's so many other things that you can track. Yeah, and especially with the whole like, Marie Kondo like
Uh-huh.
tidying up KonMari thing. It's like, the whole idea keep only what sparks joy and then
Uh-huh.
you'll know where everything is in its place. But also like I feel like Marie Kondo like doesn't deal with like power tools or things very often, like
It just
random,
covers that. Yeah.
yeah. And it's, yeah. So I'm just organizing things in Airtable. And I think it is really easy to kind of just take pictures directly on your phone too,
Yes.
which is really nice. Because like I hate having to like take it on my phone and then get it on the computer and then
Oh yeah.
upload. And it's so annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the interesting thing about having a tool that does have so much flexibility to it is that So I like to think about it like there's ways of communicating with even with yourself, right? So if you build skills in writing or in drawing, then it helps you just sort of figure out stuff, right? You can think through your problems, you can do that sort of thing. And so there's tools that we've gotten in the studio that end up being interesting extensions of that. Where if you get good at the tool, it's just like programming, right? If you get good at whatever the programming language is, you start
Hmm.
ways to use it and seeing opportunities to use it, and that sort of powers up your ability to think and to organize information, that sort of thing. And so Airtable is one of those rare tools, I think, where it's broad enough in its capability, but also deep enough that, yeah, you can start applying sort of the Airtable way, onto your basement, for example, or
Right. Yeah.
which
That's
really,
so true. And, just kind of, Airtable really, I think for people, who aren't familiar with, programming and databases and stuff, just Airtable's visual ability to link things and stuff, it really does kind of open up a different part of your brain where you can start thinking about like data and relations in ways that are actually incredibly intuitive,
mhm,
but you can't really touch in the physical world, right? Like I can't have this cup be in two places at once physically, but maybe when I organize my belongings into locations and categories, it would need to be
right.
in both things.
Mhm.
um so yeah, it is kind of a great, yeah, you make a great point about how it really can, like, it's a way of life,
Yeah, I mean,
Airtable,
like yeah, it can really open up, I think, opportunities exactly because of that, because it becomes it's an interesting sort of visual databasing tool, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah, and I even liked kind of in your both of your bases, right? Just using kind of that like single select drop down or multi select. It's really easy, like you said, when you're looking through, oh, these songs, for example, I have too many. You don't even really need to look at the names. You can just tell by the colors if
absolutely,
there's a good mix or not. So it's a really like kind of great just visual indicator. And yeah, it's really exciting to kind of see how you guys are using it just in your
yeah,
development, and then also for stupid human stuff, which
uh-huh,
I also love. Um, and yeah, I think it's Airtable, like you said.
exactly.
I'm gonna have to start like maybe
Just
whispering
whispering it,
that like at the end of every
whisper
episode or something. So tell us, I mean, of course, you know you have Levelhead release coming up, but what is kind of next for Butterscotch beyond that? Are you guys, working, I mean, I guess obviously you're sort of in the trenches right now, but kind of looking ahead, what's going on in the
yeah.
Butterscotch world?
So Levelhead is going into it's called early access, and so basically what that means is the game's not done yet. It's in
Hmm.
really highly polished, almost what you call like a beta stage. And the goal of that is to be able to develop the game alongside the community that comes to play it, right? Which we're really excited about. So we'll be doing Levelhead stuff probably for like 6 to 12 more months, honestly.
Hmm.
We got a lot more things to build. I got a lot more ideas. There's a backlog that's bigger than my entire body, but written in text. It's like that's how many ideas we have ready to go in this thing. So we'll be doing that for a bit, but a big part of our sort of future exploration is how do we push our studio forward to enable like multiple projects simultaneously, which we
Hmm.
or how do we scale up the team a little bit more? How do we again sort of get a little bit more business oriented in terms of how we think about production and things like that. And then beyond that, we've been talking about like basically just really lightweight conversations about what sort of project we'd like to do next. So no idea what that's going to be, to be honest. But for now, it's just sort of pushing out all the materials for what we do currently have in our suite of entertainment products for everybody, and then our own podcast, which is like a weekly thing where we whispered Airtable essentially, I think for 7 weeks in a row to our poor listeners, and growing those things because we love that connection with the people who actually play our games, right?
Right.
Sort of a big part of our core strategy and what we think is kind of special about being an independent studio as opposed to like one of the huge AAAs or something like that.
Hmm.
We really like to talk to our user base. So
Very cool. And to go along with that, tell our listeners where they can go online to check out more of your stuff, and find out where and when Levelhead is going to be released.
yeah, so you can go to bscotch.net to see all of our games and see updates about everything. And also, if you just Google Butterscotch Games or Butterscotch Shenanigans, then you'll find every single thing you could possibly want to find.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was very enjoyable. And now I have a new creepy, whispery tagline that I can fill awkward silences with. So,
Excellent. I'm glad to have gifted that over to you.
yeah. And best of luck on the release. And we'll be keeping an eye on you and your games.
Cool. Thank you.